Okay, well, thank you for joining us here at the Iowa Finance Authority to learn about our 2016 Take Credit Mortgage Credit Certificate Program. We are very excited to be offering yet another round of mortgage credit certificates, which are truly a tremendous benefit for Iowans, particularly in helping those first-time home buyers get off the fence and hop into a home. We are just thrilled that you're interested in partnering with us to make this possible. I'm Beth Mahaffey, the Business Development Director. With me today, I have Sherry Crone, the Single Family Program Manager, and Megan Hay, Loan Production Specialist, and Amy Thompson with our communications team. One of our newest members has also joined us. So we are going to be sharing the presentation today, and we may jump in and offer additional notes, items of note from time to time. So just wanted to make you aware. But before we get started, I wanted to cover just a few housekeeping items. As many of you know, we attempted this presentation a few weeks ago, but had to end the presentation early due to problems with our phone lines. So I apologize for that because we'd cut off and we'd come back and tried it a few times and it just didn't work. But we're not anticipating any problems today, but we are periodically checking to ensure that you're not having any problems. So if you do, please email IFA, FYI@iowa.gov, or send a question in on the webinar or in the chat feature, and we'll periodically check to ensure that you're not having any problems. In addition, we're recording today's webinar, and we will be posting to our website, and we will also email the PowerPoint to you and the link to the recording once it is up on the website. So moving on, our learning objectives for the day. So also I want to mention Adrienne Williams, also a loan production specialist here, has joined us. So she may add something. She has something to add. Right, Adrienne? Sure. So our goal today is to provide refresher information about the Take Credit MCC program and to highlight a few of the changes we've made this year. This refresher includes a basic overview of the Take Credit program and its benefits, the eligibility requirements, the compliance review process, and lender record-keeping responsibilities, as well as any effects on lender compensation. For detailed information regarding the program, please refer to the Take Credit Mortgage Credit Certificate Program Guide, dated January 2016, available on our website. And you can find that a couple of different places. You can find it in the Take Credit resources, and I believe you can also access it through the lender resources. So if you have any questions, let us know. This session, again, assumes a basic knowledge of our review process and how to use our lender portal, Lender Online. If you have questions about the compliance review process or need a program overview, we do have lender modules available on our website. They're recorded training modules similar to this that you can access at any time by going through information for lenders and then clicking on the forms and resources. I would suggest that you do go to forms and resources under the lender at some point if you haven't, because there's a lot of information available for you to utilize to help you with the process. And also, given that this presentation is meant to cover the basics, we may not address every possible scenario that you might encounter. So please always utilize us, and especially your loan production specialist, if you have any questions. We are glad to work through any unique situation. So this presentation is expected to last about 45 minutes, which allows plenty of time at the end for Q&A, and we hope you'll stay with us because a lot of the best questions come out of the Q&A. Also, GoToWebinar keeps track of the questions that are typed in, and we are going to collect all the questions for an FAQ to be posted on our website at some point. So please send questions in, and you can send them in after the webinar also. Okay. So since we have started the MCCs in the past 3 years, because there was a period of time several years ago that we also had some MCCs, but in the past 3 years that we've been offering this program, we've served over 2,000 home buyers in connection with $210 million of mortgages. And although we have until the end of 2017 to issue the funds in the current round of $80 million, we consistently run out of the funds within the first year. So I would suggest that you make your reservation and help get those first-time homebuyers, particularly off the fence, get them in a home. In addition, because the mortgage credit certificates are regulated by the same section of the IRS code as our first home program, those of you who are familiar with that program will notice that many of the requirements for take credit are similar to the first home program. So let's jump right into the benefits of the mortgage credit certificate. Many of you are already familiar with this, but the main benefit of the mortgage credit certificate is the federal tax credit of up to $2,000 a year, every year for the life of the loan, up to 30 years. And this credit is limited to loans that have 30-year fixed rate financing. Now, this credit allows for a dollar-for-dollar reduction in a borrower's federal tax liability. So this is a wonderful benefit to them. And again, each year for the life of the loan. So that's up to a $60,000 tax savings over 30 years. The IRS allows a credit of between 10 and 50% of the borrower's annual mortgage interest paid. We at IFA have chosen to use a 50% credit rate to give your borrower the most benefit. In addition, a borrower using the Homes for Iowans Plus program can also use our $2,500 plus grant to decrease the closing costs. Also, in addition to that MCC. So those closing costs, that plus grant can be used to reduce closing costs or increase their down payment. So by starting this program in January, we are hoping to hit the market at the right time for the spring buying season, and again, target those first-time home buyers. So the process for your borrower to get the credit, they first would apply with a Take Credit participating lender. A list of Take Credit lenders is available on our website, so if you're not currently a Take Credit participating lender, please sign up and we'll get you added to the list. The next step is, after the application has been taken, the lender reserves the funds in the IFA Lender Online portal. The lender collects and submits the application, eligibility docs, and any fees to IFA. IFA reviews and provides a conditional commitment. So they review those documents, and that's where the loan production specialists come in. They review the documents, and they provide a conditional commitment prior to closing. That conditional commitment is necessary to be received by you as the lender prior to closing. The lender then closes the loan and submits the post-close documentation to IFA within 30 days of closing. IFA then ensures a complete post-close package and issues the MCC to the borrower. The borrower then takes the credit at tax time. Please note that the borrower is responsible for safeguarding that credit certificate and then any forms that they receive. They will receive some forms talking about recapture, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So talking about eligibility for our Take Credit program, we break it down into 3 areas. So we break it into eligible financing, buyer and borrower eligibility, and property eligibility. If a transaction meets the requirements of these 3 categories, it can benefit from our Take Credit program. So we're going to walk through those right now. So eligible financing options for the Take Credit program are, again, limited to 30-year fixed-rate mortgage loans. So your borrower does have the availability of other 30-year fixed-rate financing other than IFA, or they have the availability of Homes for Iowans. The first home program is not available, given that it also comes from the ability to issue tax-exempt mortgage revenue bonds. If an individual does use the Homes for Iowans program, they can also use that $2,500 plus grant that I talked about earlier that can go towards down payment and closing costs. And if eligible, they can use the military grant of $5,000. In addition, they can combine both of those grants to utilize $7,500 if eligible. So the combination of the $7,500 and that mortgage credit certificate are an incredible benefit for your borrower. So they're going to remember you every year at tax time, and they're going to tell all of their friends what a great job you did for them. In addition, we've had some questions about other approved community seconds. So we at IFA allow other approved community seconds, you would need to look at the agency guidelines by loan type to see if they're allowed. At this point, I am going to take a break real quickly to make sure no one has a hand up as far as a problem. So please bear with me. Thank you for hanging on. I'm going to see if anyone has a hand raised. All right, looks good. So hopefully you're all listening and hanging on here with us. Excuse me, I'll get back. There we go. Okay, so now moving on to borrower eligibility. So the borrower must be income eligible, which we're going to talk about, and the borrower must meet one of the three following requirements. They must be either a first-time homebuyer, which is defined by the IRS as someone who has not had ownership interest in a primary residence in the past 3 years, or they're a military veteran discharged other than dishonorably with no previous participation in a mortgage revenue bond program, which if they are in Iowa, it would be our first home program or a previous MCC, or they can be purchasing in a targeted area. I do tell people that 95% of the individuals using the Mortgage Credit Certificate Program are first-time home buyers. That's been our experience. It may even be higher than that now. Other than that, there are some military veterans, but the targeted areas don't come into play very often. They are available if you use our eligibility quick check, or I'll show you where to find them on the income limit sheet shortly. But they are areas that are established by HUD, and they're economically distressed areas, and we don't very often see individuals purchasing in that area. We do want to note that non-occupying co-borrowers are not allowed for the MCC program or for any IFA program. Anything to add, anybody? Okay, no? Okay. So continuing with borrower eligibility, this is how we verify the items we talked about on the last slide. So for verifying an individual as a first-time homebuyer, we would look at the last 3 years of federal tax returns. What we're looking for there are property tax deduction or mortgage interest deduction, something like that. We do note at the bottom that non-citizen residents are subject to the same verification requirements. So if an individual does not have 3 years of U.S. tax returns, we would not be able to verify that they're a first-time home buyer. So that's why we add that note. Now, verification of rent may be needed if their current address is different from the last tax return. That's just to ensure that there was no purchase of a property. And then we'd also need to look at a divorce decree that happened within the last 3 years to verify no ownership interest in a home. If someone's qualifying as an exempt veteran, we would look at the DD 214 to see the discharge status. And then again, we would have the borrower certify on the MCC-01 that they did not have any prior use of tax-exempt financing. So what you're probably waiting for, the Take Credit Borrower Income Eligibility Limits. So income limits are set annually by HUD for each county by household size. These income limits are a little bit different than some of our other income limits with the First Home or the Homes for Iowans program, and they're available on our website, and I am going to take you there. So that hyperlink took us to the Take Credit page on our website, and I'm scrolling down to income limits. So we'll open it up. And as you see, not only do you have income limits, but you also have purchase price limits here at the top. These income limits were effective May of 2015, and they do typically change on an annual basis whenever HUD gets those numbers out and they're approved by the IRS. So as you see, they are by county and by household size. So if we were looking at someone who is purchasing in Polk County. If it's a 1 to 2 person household, then the income limit would be $75,000. If it's 3 or more persons in the household, the income limit is $86,250. If someone is purchasing in a targeted area, they have a little bit different income limits. So we'll go down here to Des Moines, because again, we were talking about Polk County in this instance. And you'll see that there are certain census tracts that are designated targeted areas. Keep in mind that's only one option. An individual has to be a first-time home buyer or military veteran or purchase in a targeted area. They don't have to purchase in a targeted area to use this program. So their income limits are higher, as you see, 1 to 2 person, 90,000, 3 or more, 105. And then if you click on the census tract, a map will pop up eventually, and it will outline the area that is within that census tract. So that is how you would find the census tract if someone was possibly purchasing in a targeted area. Again, the purchase price limit is also higher for the targeted area. It's $316,000. In general, for the MCC, it's $258,000, but we are going to get into that here in a little bit. So, anything to add, you guys? I'll stop periodically. Okay. All right. So, moving on to borrower income eligibility, how we define income, how we calculate income, and verification of income. So, in calculating income, we do a projection for the 12 months following closing. We would include all sources of income, even those not used for underwriting. So what we're saying there is that at ISO, we are looking for qualifying income to see if an individual is eligible for our quote-unquote assistance, so our assistance to provide the home, the affordable home ownership. We are not looking at qualifying income as far as repayment, as you would be looking at for underwriting purposes. So actually, we are looking at eligibility income, and you are looking at qualifying income. So just want to make sure we have some questions about that. So the 1003 should include all income, not just qualifying income for underwriting purposes. So that's what we mean by that second bullet point and the third bullet point when we say always use best case income. So again, we have to verify, we have to prove to the IRS that we've looked at all sources of income and verifies that this individual is eligible based upon those income limits. So in the case of someone in Polk County, that's a 1 to 2 person, we would need to be able to prove that their income was $75,000 or less to be eligible for this program. Also want to note that the pre-close compliance review is not approval, so please pay attention to those conditions related to income. And when we're looking at income, we do include the income of the borrower's spouse, and any other person that may be on title, and then the spouse of someone on title. And that's due to the laws here of homeownership in Iowa. When you are calculating income, let's first go, I want to show you this resource that we have that defines single-family income eligibility. So that hyperlink has taken me to the forms and resources page that I talked about earlier under information for lender. And now I'm going to single-family income eligibility guidance. And so this little resource sheet will talk to you about what we look at, what we need to include in our definition of income, and then sources of income to exclude. I'm not going to read these to you. I know you guys can all read because being a loan officer, I think that's a requirement. But I wanted to make sure that you knew that this was out there and that it was available. So it's 2 pages long. So sometimes familiarize yourself with that. It's very handy. But some items to note that we do include when we're doing that 12-month projection and we're looking at the income of the borrower and spouse, title holder and spouse, things to include are bonus and commission or overtime. If someone just quit working, we still would include a reasonable income that they might have been earning previously. We need the income. Sometimes people only put the qualifying income. As I mentioned earlier, we need all income. If there's a second job, we would need to include that income. If there's any court-ordered income, that would be included. any scholarship and grant income that's not restricted to tuition and books, and then any rental income if they have a rental property. And that sometimes comes into play, and I would like you guys to hop in if you'd like. If someone in another program, if someone is not a first-time home buyer and they have a home they're selling, then we would have to look at the, or they are keeping it to rent, and we'd have to look at the rental income. But not really pertinent to the MCC, so I'm sorry, I digress. Let's go back to our slide. So we also have a resource here that you can look at as far as what documents we look at to verify income. So these again are available under Forms and Resources. Probably pretty straightforward if you take a look at this, but of course with employment we'd be looking at W-2s, pay stubs within 60 days of loan close, things similar that you're already looking at for qualifying income, but please just remember to include all income, not just qualifying income. All right, on to property eligibility. So for the property to be eligible, it must be within the price limit that I showed you earlier on the income list, income eligibility list. But also, the property must be a new purchase, and what we mean by that is there's no prior ownership interest. It must be immediately occupied by the eligible borrower, and it must be their primary residence. So we're not helping people buy a vacation home, we're helping them buy their primary residence. So things that aren't eligible are excess land, so they cannot be purchasing more than one parcel with the funds associated with the MCC. Personal property is not eligible. Secondary residence or investment properties, again, this is their primary residence. And then properties that are used for a trade or business. If there is some business in the home, please contact your loan production specialist and they can talk to you about that. There is a certain percentage that the IRS will allow. And we're also going to get into this, I believe, a little bit later, but as far as the excess land or the personal property, if those items are in the purchase agreement, then again, we have to meet IRS criteria. So we have to prove that any loan that is subsidized with the mortgage credit certificate is not going to fund the purchase of excess land or personal property. So in that instance, we would need to ensure that the borrower had enough funds to cover the purchase of the valuation of those items, so whether it's personal property or additional parcels. Anything else? Okay, so on to the purchase price limits, which again I showed you on the income limits chart. So targeted area up to $316,000, non-targeted area $258,000. So when we're talking about that purchase price limit, we define the purchase price actually as really as the acquisition price. So it includes all costs to acquire the property. So that would include any in-kind or seller benefit, such as a non-tax proration that would be paid for by the borrower, costs to complete the home, obviously excluding buyer labor to complete the property, and then if it's new construction, we would need to include the cost of the lot if it was owned less than 2 years prior to the purchase of the home. Always keep in mind that the acquisition cost must be less than that purchase price limit that we just showed you on the previous slide. So, and the reason for adding this note is that some individuals just want to look at the purchase agreement, but you have to include these other costs to acquire when you're comparing it to that limit. So how we verify whether the property meets the criteria that we set out before is that we do look at the purchase agreement. We will always look at all addendums and reference attachments. If there is personal property included, as I mentioned earlier, we will require a disinterested third-party valuation of that personal property, and then we will have to ensure that the borrower has enough funds in the transaction to cover the valuation of that personal property. So again, the funds, the MCC cannot go towards funding the purchase of personal property or additional parcels of land. So the same thing. We would have to ensure that the borrower had enough money to cover the valuation of that additional parcel of land. If it's new construction, we would look at the documentation of the cost of the lot. And we also looked at the appraisal. Would you guys like to add anything to that? Okay. Those of you who have worked with us in our first home program are already familiar with these items. So we'll move on. Just type the questions in if you have them, and we'll address them at the end in the Q&A. So the process of issuing an MCC is similar to our other loan products and programs. The lender would take the loan application. The lender reserves the MCC in Lender Online. The lender would then upload the compliance review package, the pre-close compliance review package. And IFA, and sends IFA the $350 borrower application fee. In some instances, I believe the borrower is submitting that since it's electronic now. And then we ask for that no less than 5 business days prior to closing. So we ask for at least 5 days for the loan production specialist to be able to review that package. But ideally, we would like it sooner rather than later, so that if there are any items that we need further information on, or any conditions that the loan production specialists come up with, we aren't delaying closing. So the sooner, the better. IFA completes the pre-closing program review, compliance review. You would satisfy any of those conditions that we talked about. That's why I said please allow really more than those 5 days ideally. And then once those are satisfied, IFA will issue the notice of conditional commitment, and that is necessary before the loan closes. So the lender has to have that conditional commitment before the loan closes. The lender would then deliver the closed loan package to IFA after loan close, and then a post-close program review would be done just to make sure nothing changed from that conditional commitment on the pre-close. After that, the lender would satisfy any of the post-close conditions, and then the lender would deliver that completed post-close package to IFA within 30 days of loan close. So that means all conditions are satisfied and all documentation is turned in within 30 days of loan close. IFA then determines final eligibility and would issue the mortgage credit certificate to the mortgagor, with a copy also going to a lender. And as we mentioned in the beginning, that borrower is responsible for maintaining those that mortgage credit certificate for the future. So we have a few pre-close process tips. The mortgage credit certificate is a separate reservation from a first mortgage in Lender Online. And unfortunately, at this point, the information doesn't copy over, so you will need to enter that separate reservation. The reservation does expire after 60 days. IFA does not review or approve underwriting. So we have just the guidelines that we talked about earlier as far as eligibility that the loan production specialists look at, but they don't do any of the underwriting. That's incumbent upon you by loan type to do, or your processing shop to do the underwriting. So follow agency guidelines. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, that commitment notice must be received prior to closing, and Iowa Title Guarantee is required on the MCC and on any IFA loan product. A few other items that I want to note is that we do ask for those 5 business days, as I mentioned earlier. If a rush is absolutely needed, please send an email request. Also, it's very helpful if you submit the compliance review packages just one time through Lender Online. When we get documents sporadically, it takes longer to review those documents. Also, please submit only complete documents with signatures and lender certified documents. And we are going to talk about that 60-day reservation expiration time frame and some relocks later on. So move on. So moving on to post-close. So the conditional commitment has been received, the loan closed, and now we're talking about post-close process. Keep in mind that the take credit funding is limited. So the commitment may be reduced if the commitment expires before the compliance documents are submitted and the funds run out. So that may reduce or completely eliminate the mortgage credit certificate. We do need to receive that complete post-close package within 30 days of closing. If a loan amount changes after the commitment is issued, check with IFA determining the funding availability. So just let us know of any changes along the line so that we're all on the same page. And then really make sure to educate your borrower so that they get that full MCC benefit. As I mentioned earlier, they're going to think you're a superstar, and they are going to thank you for years to come. So now I'm going to get into the exciting talk about taxes a little bit. And I won't get too deep. I've tried to just do a high level here, but this is a comparison that you can use with your home buyer or your potential borrower to demonstrate the benefit of the mortgage credit certificate. So in this instance, we assumed a loan of $100,000, a 30-year loan, obviously, because that's all that is allowed, at 3.75 interest. So the annual mortgage interest paid in this case was $3,750. The mortgage credit certificate at a 50% tax rate is $1,875. That comes directly off the tax liability. Thus, there is a dollar for dollar savings on their tax liability of $1,875. Now, some people will ask, well, what if my borrower wants to itemize? Well, first of all, I'd like to note that to itemize, if an individual is a single borrower, to itemize, they would need to have itemized deductions greater than $6,300 because that's the standard deduction for 2015. Or if they're married, they would need itemized deductions that were greater than $12,600. So most first-time homebuyers don't have enough deductions to actually itemize. So they would take the standard deduction, and then this credit is just another benefit in addition to that. If there is a balance, so in this case where we took the $1,875 as a mortgage credit, so as that direct dollar for dollar reduction, and if they do itemize, they can take the remainder, the other half of the $1,875 as an itemized deduction. Keep in mind, any itemized deductions really are just a benefit at the individual's tax rate, not a dollar for dollar reduction in their tax liability. Yes, so last year we went through a couple of tax returns that were samples based upon that prior slide. But this year, as opposed to walking you through that, we are actually going to put those resources out on our website, and also we will put them in a resource package that we will email to you after this training. So we'll email you the PowerPoint and the sample resources. In addition, what I didn't go through this year was your borrower would have the availability to convert these tax credits into withholding allowances on their W-4. So because they will have a tax credit on their tax liability, they don't have to withhold as much money out of their paycheck, and so they would do that by adjusting their W-4. So there is a method of doing that, and I'll put the sample forms out on our website, and again, I will include those in the email package. I have had a question about individuals that have possibly a child tax credit or an earned income tax credit, and if they have one of those types of credits, and there are other ones, so I always want to refer you to your tax professional, but if they do have child tax credits or credits like that, such that they don't have a tax liability, they may not be able to use the mortgage credit certificate. The mortgage credit certificate is not a refundable credit. So by that I mean that they won't get money back. They have to apply it towards a tax liability. But again, I would suggest that, if there are questions like that, you can sure talk to us. Here you talk to me, and I'd be glad to try and help you. But you may want to talk to their tax professional. So we've had also a few questions about recapture. So recapture can occur in any case that there is a a loan that is considered to have, a mortgage loan that's considered to have a federal subsidy, which would be our first home or our mortgage credit certificate. So some people get very concerned when they hear the word recapture, but I really wanted to explain to you on this slide that recapture doesn't happen very often, because there are 3 things that must happen for recapture to occur or to trigger recapture. The 3 things are that the home is sold or disposed of in the first 9 years from closing date, which that happens fairly often, but they also have to have a sale, a gain on the sale or disposition of the home. And there are certain parameters around that gain. It's not like you would normally consider a gain, because there are the IRS code allows for a deduction of selling costs, a deduction of improvements, things like that. So again, it gets into kind of that tax code and maybe talking to your tax professional as far as calculating that gain. But again, that might happen. We're hoping that that happens, right? That someone sells their home and they get a gain. But the third item that has to happen to trigger recapture is that individual's income has to go up 5% each year based upon the number of years they've been in the home. And that's not increasing based upon their income. It's increasing based upon the income eligibility limit. So when we looked at Polk County and we saw that for a 1 to 2 person home, the income limit was $75,000. So let's say someone gets the MCC this year and they're qualifying in Polk County, in 1 to 2 person household. If they sell the house in 3 years, then their income would have to be greater than $75,000 times 5, compounded for the next year, times 5, compounded times 5 for the next year. So 3 years worth of compounding of that income. So that's the piece that makes it such that individuals aren't subject to recapture very often. So I also wanted to mention that you as lenders are not responsible for keeping track of the recapture. That is really up to the individual borrower and their tax preparer, if indeed at some point they would be subject to recapture. So if the recapture was triggered, so they met all 3 of those criteria that we just talked about, the absolute most that the borrower would owe would be the lesser of 50% of the gain on the sale or disposition, or, again, the lesser of, or 6.25% of the loan amount. But again, the recapture tax is going to depend on how much time has passed since closing, the manner in which the property is disposed of, whether it's sold or if it's passed on to someone else, and then the amount of gain and other factors. So as I mentioned, really the best practice would be to talk to a tax advisor. So anything that anybody would like to add?
The only other thing that I'd like to add there is, if you are familiar with using our programs, you may recall that in the first home program, if a borrower uses that program and they are subject to recapture and they make a request, we will actually reimburse the borrower for a recapture tax in the first home program. However, we do not have that ability to do that in the mortgage credit certificate program, and so that's why we're bringing this information to you, because there is a difference between those 2 programs. Okay.
Okay. So I'm just going to real quickly check to make sure no one's having any problems. Okay. I think these are questions that we'll go back to in a little while. I don't see that anyone's having any problems, so I hope not. And then I'm going to pass this over to Sherry.
Okay. So again, there are some IRS compliance documents that your borrower and your seller are required to sign with use of this program. And these forms will look very familiar to you if you use our first mortgage programs, because they are very similar to the MRB docs that a borrower has to sign with use of the first home program. So there's the MCC01, which we call Affidavit of Purchaser. There is the MCC02, which provides the recapture notification to the borrower. And then there is the MCC03, which is the seller affidavit. So the affidavit of purchaser verifies how the borrower is actually qualifying for the program. So whether or not they're a first-time home buyer, or they're an exempt veteran, or they're purchasing in a targeted area. It also includes the household income and the purchase price and acquisition cost. So a few things to keep in mind with the MCC01, that the borrower signature and the notary dates should match. And watch, actually read through the form and internalize what it means so that you can ensure that the borrower is completing that form accurately. One of the things that we see in the first paragraph is that the borrower has to choose how they're qualifying. So either they're the first-time home buyer, or they're the exempt veteran, or they're purchasing in a targeted area, and then they fill out additional information based on that. So watch that section. The MCC02 is fairly straightforward in that it just requires the borrower's signature. Seller affidavit, again, make sure that the seller's signature and the notary match. There's some additional information to complete on that form as well. So just make sure that you watch those things. Those forms are available in the lender portal, so in Lender Online. After you make the MCC reservation, they're available in PDF docs under the borrower's reservation and loan status, or you can get generic forms available under program documents in Lender Online as well. Okay. As with any IRS program, there is lender reporting and record keeping required. So each year there is the annual submission of the IRS Form 8329, which is due 30 days after the end of the year. So January 31st of every year, that form is due. We do provide a sample form on our website each year, and this sample form includes the information that you need to complete that particular form for your lender shop, including the non-issued bond amount and the election date. So that's where you can find that information each year. The borrower is included only in the initial reporting of the MCC year. So we've had some lender questions. They think they have to continuously report these borrowers year after year after year. But you do not have to do that. You only do it with the initial issuance. And then if there are any subsequent reissuances, if the borrower refinances the property later on, then you would report them again at that particular time. So that's information there for your use. Lender Online allows lenders to run reports in the Reports tab of Lender Online, which tells you how many MCCs were issued in the year. So you have the ability to run that report as well, and then match it against your own internal records to make sure that you have everything. For record keeping, obviously, you're required to maintain that borrower record for 6 years with that additional information listed there. Okay. Let's talk about fees and compensation next. There is a fee schedule that's actually included in the 2016 program guide, which is available on the website. There's also a separate page for the fee schedule out there so that you can print it and keep it handy when you are using this particular program. So first, let's talk about the borrower fees. Permitted financing fees that we allow are the usual and reasonable financing fees that you normally see on a mortgage loan. So you're not allowed to charge anything above and beyond additional, for the MCC program than you would normally charge, with the exception of a $250 processing fee that lenders can charge. So sometimes we see this on closing disclosures, sometimes not. I would like to make the comment that the $250 processing fee cannot be funded with either of our DPA grants. So that would be both PLUS and the military. We talked earlier about the application fee that a borrower must pay. We do have the option this year, or not actually an option, but a requirement that the fees need to be paid electronically. So there's a borrower invoice that can be printed out of Lender Online and provided to the borrower. And then the borrower goes out to that website and makes that payment with a credit card or PayPal. Same thing for lender fees. So we're using that system this year, and that's because it streamlines our process and makes our processing for you much faster than what it has been in the past. As also in the past, that $350 borrower application fee is waived entirely if the borrower uses a Homes for Iowans or Homes for Iowans Plus program. So that's another additional benefit that you can offer your borrower and save them some money that way. The annual lender sign-up fees are pretty straightforward. There is an increase from last year, so I'm not going to go through those. We've sent out emails to lenders that used the program in the past year, and sent them an invitation to renew, so that process is going on right now. The only thing I really need to add about that is, again, please make that payment electronically. We have gotten a few checks in the office, and we are returning those checks and asking lenders to make that payment electronically. What is new for this year are 2 fees related to relocks and commitment extensions. These fees are for the Mortgage Credit Certificate program only, not for First Home, not for Homes for Iowans, not for the Military Homeownership Assistance Program right now. Okay. As you know, the MCC reservation is made and requires a lock on those funds for 60 days. And that means that the financing must close within that 60-day time frame. If it does not, you can request a relock of that reservation when you are within 10 days of closing. We will relock that reservation if there's funding available for 10 days, allowing you to close the loan. However, there will be a $100 fee for that 10-day relock. So time will be very important, and you want to make sure that you're watching those dates in Lender Online. Likewise, a commitment extension fee is new this year as well. As you know, you have 30 days after the loan closes to submit a complete post-close package to us so that we can issue the certificate. In the past, we've done waiting lists and that sort of thing. You know, as the funds start to run out and we don't get complete packages in the door, and that's a hassle and it's stressful and it's, you know, just difficult for everyone involved, the borrower, the lender, and us. So this year, you can ask for, if you do not get a complete package in the door in 30 days, you can ask for one 30-day extension of that commitment. That allows you to get the remaining documents in the door, the MCC issued, and then hopefully we can eliminate the waiting list at the end of the year. But there is a $200 fee for that 30-day extension. So the loan reservation change form that you complete in Lender Online now will be updated with that information, and you will make the request. We'll have to send you an invoice. You make the payment electronically, and then we'll go ahead and relock or extend that commitment fee. Okay, if you have any questions about that, you can contact us here at the office.
Sherry, do you want to speak to if the package, if there is not an extension made, and if the package is not submitted, a complete package within the 30 days, there is that possibility that the MCC will be canceled, and if the funds ran out, I mean, in the past we put people on the waiting list, but if the funds ran out, there is that possibility that they couldn't get the MCC.
Correct.
So for people that hadn't used it, I wanted to make sure they understood.
And we always get a few calls at the end of the year from borrowers who believe that they have received the MCC where in fact they haven't. So you really have to be cognizant of that 30-day timeline and make sure that it's met. Okay. All right, lender sign up. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we have sent Everyone who was a lender last year, an invitation to renew. If you weren't a lender last year and you want to sign up, the information is available on our website and can be sent to the lender.inquiry box. And then we will take it from there and get that processed for you. The only other thing that I wanted to add, it's an important thing and it has come up in the past, that the financing, if you're not using an Iowa Finance Authority mortgage product, must close in the name of the Take Credit participating lender, or your borrower will not be able to receive that mortgage credit certificate. And I think that that is everything we have. So I know that there's a few questions out there in the box, and we'll answer those. So if anyone has anything else, now would be the time.
We're going to take a look at the typed questions, and then we will look for hands raised and try to unmute individuals to see if they have a question that they didn't type. First of all, when Megan came in to the training, she said she just received a question from a lender asking, how does a lender know if the borrower has paid the MCC fee? Is that correct, Megan? And I believe that you as a lender will need to call your loan production specialist, and then they can verify if your borrower hasn't given you that information. There's no way to, there's no interface on Lender Online to see if the borrower has paid.
So the person making the payment, whether it be the lender or the borrower, actually receives an email response that the payment has been made. So if you as the lender are the one making the borrower payment, then obviously you will get that notification. But if you're requiring the borrower to make the payment, then the borrower can either forward you that payment receipt, or you can contact your loan production specialist and find out, whether or not it's been paid. We'll continue to work on that and see if there's something that we can do to notify you accordingly. So we'll take that under advisement and maybe provide a later answer in the frequently asked questions.
Okay. The first question was, how can we print out your PowerPoint presentation? We will be emailing it, but we will also post it to our website. We have a section on the Forms and Resources page under Lender, Information for Lender, that has various training modules, so we will post it there, along with hopefully a recording and some of the resources that we've talked about, so the income tax returns and such. And I believe we'll also post it to the Forms and Resources under the Take Credit page. So we're trying to simplify things and not have things in too many places, but I think in this case we'll put them in both areas. So we will email it to you, and then it will be available on the website. So the next question is a surprise to me. It says, we've talked with local accountants, and they stated that the credit is refundable. Is this clarified anywhere? So I will actually get back to you on that. I don't believe that anything has changed. It wasn't refundable in the past, but I'll verify for sure. And actually, this is Beth Mahaffey, and if you would like to email me those accountants, I would be glad to visit with them so that to talk to, so we can clarify. But and that one I'm going to have to do some additional research, and then we'll post it on the FAQs. Let's see, sorry. Excuse me. In regards to recapture, if the home was purchased as an individual, but then later married and then sold the home, is the income recapture limit based on their joint income or just the original borrower? And actually, this is a case where, if anyone's income was going to go up, this might be a scenario where it would go up. So if they get married, yes, so it's based on the family income. But at that point, when you do that compounding of the 5% each year that I was talking about, if there's 3 or more persons in the home, you would start with that income limit. If just the 1 to 2, you'd still start with the $75,000, for instance, that's there in Polk County. But if it ended up being that they had a child, you would go, or someone else living with them, you would go to that other income limit to do that compounding. But that is an instance where possibly, or that they could, their income could be enough that it would trigger the recapture. So next question can you touch on what personal property isn't allowed? Is it all personal property, or can the purchase agreement include a refrigerator, stove, dishwasher, etc.? So I'm going to say right now, I'm not totally in agreement with our definition of personal property, but the way that we look at it right now, personal property is, well, I'll go the other way. So real property that's not considered personal property would be anything that's attached, including the refrigerator, the stove, the dishwasher if it's built in, the microwave if it's built in. However, the washer and dryer are considered personal property. So that's where I disagree a little bit, but that's my own opinion. So the washer and dryer is considered personal property. A microwave, if it's on the counter and not built in, is personal property. A dishwasher, if it's on wheels, is personal property. Obviously, anything like a snowblower, or you guys have examples. You guys look at the files a lot. A second refrigerator. Freezer. Adrian, you have any that you run across very often? Pool table. Okay. And, and what? A hot tub. So in that case, again, we would ask for a third-party valuation, and then need to ensure that the borrower had enough funds in the transaction to cover it, so that our funds weren't covering that. But it's something we've looked at, but our bond counsel, the IRS code, actually, the bond counsel said the IRS code uses washer and dryer as an example of personal property. So that's why they're taking that stance right now. But I'm working on it. So next question. Can the processing fee and application fee from any source be from any source, like a gift, or do they have to be from the borrower's own funds? Well, you can't use our PLUS grants for them, but I mean, the payment is coming from them. We're not really verifying where the payment came from, so that's not an issue as far as any IRS guideline or anything. So I guess that would be fine. And then how will we know when the borrower has paid his application fee? Yeah, we already talked about that. Okay, let's see if there's anything else. All right, that looks like all of the written questions. I'm going to go to see if anyone has their hand raised. Let's see. So, doesn't look like anyone has their hand raised. Real quick, I'm going to check the chat. I'll go back to see if there are any additional questions. Let's see. Megan, you're better at this. I should have you do that. Looks like there is another question. Can we pay for the application fee and then charge it to the borrower on the closing disclosure?
You would need to follow agency guidelines with respect to that. So whatever loan type, you would also want to check with your compliance department. We programmatically don't have an issue with it, except that you need to ensure that the PLUS and military funds aren't used to pay for that.
Okay, another question. Does the app fee processing fee have to be shown on the LE and the CD? No, it's not really a part of the loan transaction. But I guess I would check with your compliance department. As far as we're concerned, it's not part of the loan transaction. But yeah, you would check with your compliance department, I guess, regarding that. And are affordable seconds allowed? So approved community seconds according to loan type. So you would also have to check with your compliance department, and they would have to follow agency guidelines for that.
Or no regular seconds are.
What?
No regular seconds.
Oh, yeah, no regular seconds are allowed. So thanks, Megan. Okay, I'll wait a second to see if we have any other questions. Well, I'm not seeing any, and look at that. We are just about exactly on time. So want to thank you again for participating with the Iowa Finance Authority. And I did want to mention that you will be getting an email about a Lender Awards Luncheon coming up on March 10th at Prairie Meadows, and we'd love to see you all there. So watch for that email. That will be coming. Also, we are really making an effort to have all of our events listed on our website. So any trainings, they may not just be lender trainings, but realtor trainings and things like that in your area. So please be mindful of that. And again, we're always open to suggestions. If you have things that you'd like to see trainings for, or things that we could provide some resources for, please let us know, because we are very fortunate to have you as partners, and we'd like to be able to help you with any tools that we can provide. So one more check of questions, and seeing none, I just want to thank you for attending today, and please let us know if you have any questions, and watch for your email with the presentation.